Okay, so no, we're gonna have class on Thursday. We just have to figure out what time, but we're gonna have class on Thursday, even though it's Thanksgiving. We'll have class. I know we may do it at 7:30. We may do it ahead of time. Now I don't know whether it'll be me or somebody else, but we will have class on Thursday because we learn every day, rain or shine. That's why it's called Daf Yomi. What? I don't know whether you'll need a code, but the door will be open. Yeah, yeah. So then, okay. So here we go. Let's get going. We can talk about any other questions at the end. We are continuing our discussion of the Mishnah from Tedem Bet. That Mishnah, the second to last line of the Mishnah, referenced if something happens in the domain of the damaged and the damager, meaning that you have a partnership. Okay, so let's say Mark and I have a partnership and we own a field, and my cow on that, or my ox on that field, gores Mark's ox. So the question is it considered like it's Mark's field, and therefore I'm going to be liable, or is it considered like my field and maybe I won't be liable? So it depends on the situation. Or my animal walks on Mark's beautiful rose bushes that he was going to cut and sell in order to make some money. So that would be the problem. So it was unclear, however, how we read the Mishnah, because the Mishnah could be read in two different ways. And indeed, we had a debate as to that fact. Rav Chisda, in the name of Rav Imi, said that connected the line about damaged and damager property, the partnership property, to the last line of the Mishnah. And the last line of the Mishnah referenced one's ability, one's obligated for shane and regal damages done. Reference the last line of the Mishnah. The last line of the Mishnah says that you're obligated to pay from the best. So that would indicate that you would have liability. And Rabbi Lazar says, no, let's connect it to the prior line of the Mishnah. The prior line of the Mishnah said that one's not obligated for shane and regal damage in a jointly owned field. So as a result, that would mean that this would also, in a partnership field, you would also not be obligated for shane and regal. However, then we need to interpret the last line of the Mishnah, because the last line of the Mishnah says that there's liability. So what is that referring to? So Rebbe Lazar would say that that's referring to Keren. Now, the problem was, and we asked this question at the end of the day yesterday, we said that explanation works for Shmuel, because Shmuel, in our original Mishnah at the very beginning of the Masechet, said that we don't talk about Keren in that first Mishnah. But what about according to Rav? According to Rav, when we reference shore as one of the four main categories, that included Keren. And so in that case, according to Rav, we already learned about Keren in the first Mishnah. And so according to Rebbe Lazar's understanding of the second Mishnah, of this Mishnah on Tedem Bet, how do we understand that last line of the Mishnah? Because that last line of the Mishnah says that you're liable for something, and it must be teaching us something new. So to answer that question, we quoted a Baraisa. And the Baraisa said that, again, this is a question only according to Rebbe Lazar's explanation and according to Rav within that explanation. And to answer that question, we quoted a Baraisa that says that the Mishnah's language of when it does damage, the damager is obligated, comes to include an unpaid watcher, a borrower, a paid watcher, or a renter, where the animal did damage on their property. As in the case of Tom, he pays half damage, and in the case of Muad, he pays full damage. So now, exactly whose property did damage to whom's? I think whose property does damage to whom, and what is a key question in that first line of that brisa, because it's not completely clear, and we're going to deal with that in a moment. And then the Baraisa concluded that, however, if the wall breaks in the night or robbers broke it open, and the animal went out and did damage, so then there won't be any liability. So as we pick up at the start of the fourth wide line on Yud Gimel Amud Bet, the Gemara attempts to clarify the situation. So again, Amar Mar, so we're going to quote from the Baraisa, because again, what we have an answer. We know that it's supposed to gonna teach us something about unpaid watchers, borrowers, paid watchers, or renters. That's what the last line of our Mishnah is going to come and teach. However, what is the lesson? Hechidami. I'm sorry. Kishehizik chava mazik lahabi shomer chinam. Kishehizik chava mazik. So that's the language from our Mishnah. When it does damage, the damager will be liable. It comes to include the a unpaid watcher, a borrower, a paid watcher, and a renter. Hey, chidami. But what is specifically the case? Because Torah Torah that one maybe it's the ox of the lender. It ended up doing damage to the borrower's ox. So again, I borrow Stan's ox, and Stan's ox then does damage to my ox. So if that were the case, lamele, Stan should be able to say to me, Ilu azik ba'alma, if my ox had done damage to somebody else's ox, right? Bas l'shalume at. You, meaning me, I would have been responsible because I borrowed your ox. I'm responsible for watching it. So hashta de azge l'torah didach be'ina l'shalume. Now that my ox damaged, that Stan's ox damaged my ox, that Stan should have to pay for it. Right now, Stan is going to win. That even though Stan's ox damaged my ox, I borrowed Stan's ox, so I'm responsible for watching it. So that can't be the case where we're talking about liability for the watchers. Ella de azke Torah de showel the Torah de mashal. Oh, maybe we're talking about a situation where again I borrowed Stan's ox, and now I borrowed Stan's ox, and now my ox did damage to Stan's ox. So lay. So 1 second. But then we have a problem because what is again, assuming let's say my ox is a tom ox, meaning that it hasn't gored 3 times, so I'm only liable for 50% damages. But here's what Stan can tell me. Stan can tell me, ilu itzak ma'alma, if Stan's ox had been damaged just out in the world, I was walking through the marketplace, and some other ox, while I've borrowed Stan's ox, some other oxes comes, let's say Mark's ox comes and gores Stan's ox, then I'm going to be liable 100% to Stan. So hashta de azke Torah didach. Now Stan will tell me your ox did the damage to my ox. Palga nitzak because again, remember that the Brisa said specifically that the liability is only 50% for a tom. So that doesn't make sense. So, and by the way, we're not going to say that it's that I'm watching Stan's ox and Stan's ox goes and gores Mark's ox, because we're going to learn that explicitly in a Mishnah. So it's going to be something between Stan's ox and my ox. So what is the story? So la'olam, so Ella, so excuse me, where did I get up to? Right. Okay. Yeah. So la'olam the azke. Right. We're now the second to last line, third word from the end of the line. La'olam de azke Torah de mashal the Torah de shoel. Actually, we're going to say that it is in fact Stan's ox that did damage to my ox. I'm borrowing Stan's ox. And here's the case that we're talking about. Shekibil alab shmiras gufo, that I accepted on myself the watching of Stan's ox's body, but but I did not agree to be in any way liable for any damage that Stan's ox did. And so as a result, Stan should still be liable. Well, if that were true, if in fact, and we had just turned to Yudalin and Aleph, we have a problem because the end of this brisa, what does it teach? Nifritza Balayla, if the fence broke open in the middle of the night, Oshapur Datsua Listim, or robbers broke it open, Vyatsasa Vehizika, and the animal went out into damage, putter. We said that the borrower is exempt. But Habiyom Chayim, that implies that in the morning, in the daytime, if it went out because I'm supposed to be watching it, I would have been liable. But Hello, Kibel Alav Shmiras Nezakav. You just told me that the case that we're talking about is where I borrowed it and refused to accept any liability for damage. So how can I, if I refuse to accept any liability for damage, how could I be liable for damage if it escaped during the daytime? So Hachid Kamar. So we're going to clarify the situation. And we're going to basically say that there's a line missing in the brisa. And what we should say is that in the middle of the brisa, we would add the line, if in fact the borrower did accept responsibility for guarding, well, then he's going to be liable. And nifritza balayla opratzua listim, but if the wall broke or in the middle of the night or robbers broke it open, and then the animal went out into damage, putter. So what is our brisa reading? Our brisa says the following. Our brisa says that if the borrower refuses to accept liability associated with the damage done by the animal he's borrowing, and the animal does damage to the person, to the borrower, well, then the lender will be responsible, even though it's now being supervised by the borrower. And that is true whether it's a borrower, a paid watcher, a renter, or an unpaid watcher. In all of those situations, assuming that the person who's watching the item did not take on responsibility for the doing of damage, well, then what we're learning in the last line of our Mishnah is that all of those situations are going to be situations of liability for the lender. And so that's what the Mishnah is coming to teach us. So as a result, we've been able to now clarify the Mishnah, and so now the Gemara is going to challenge, challenges Rabbi Lazar's view that Shane and Regel do not apply to property owned by partners, right? Because Rabbi Lazar is the one who said that there wouldn't be any liability. So here's what the story is. So Aini, is that really true that one would not be liable for Shane and Regel? As Rashi says, take a look at end of the top line in Rashi. Eini v'had tani Rabbi Yosef. Ad Rabbi Elazar parach. We're asking according to Rabbi Elazar. V'had tani Rabbi Yosef. What did Rabbi Yosef teach as we go back into the Gemara? Chatzar hashutafin v'pundak. If you have a yard belonging to partners, or you have a hotel, an inn, chayiv bahen al hashen v'al haregel. If one is going to be liable there for Shane and Regel, meaning if my animal comes and eats your delicious hamburger from off your plate, well, then I'm going to be liable to buy you a new hamburger. Or Regel, if my animal comes and walks on your vase, so then I'm going to be liable, just by walking along, it does damage. I'm going to be liable for that. To the Rabbi Elazar, doesn't that conflict with Rabbi Elazar's view? Rabbi Elazar, again, was the one who said Shane and Regel, done by one partner into another in a jointly owned yard, is not liable. And yet here we're saying, well, we're talking about either a yard of partners, a partnership, or an inn where basically everybody chips in together. So Amarlach Rabbi Elazar would say, V'tizbara, 1 second, you think that you're so great that you got something on me? Masniyasa mi lo pligi. We have another brisa that is going to argue and have my perspective, because listen to the following. V'hatanya, we got a brisa that says the following: Arba klalos haya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer ben Nizakin. There were 4 general rules that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says with respect to damages. Rule number 1: Kol shehu rishus l'nizak v'lo l'mazik chayav bakol. Anytime that the damaged person, the damage happens in the land of the damage, that the damager has no writes in chayav bakol, then the damager is going to be liable for everything. And we will see, in fact, that that will override the rules of tam and muad. Meaning, if your animal even though your animal has never gored before, your animal walks into my field without permission, and gores my animal, even though that goring is only a muad goring and should be liable only 50%, you're going to be liable for the whole thing. Demazik below the nizik, and we're going to see that explained further in a moment. Demazik below the nizik. What happens if it's the other way around, right? So the damager is the owner of the property and not the damage. Well, pater mikol. What are you doing in my field that you got damaged? You don't belong there. So if it's a partnership, and this is obviously the key line for Rebbe Lazar's proof, whether it's like a partnership field or an area, a valley where everybody comes to graze, so it's considered like it belongs to everyone. Then you would not be liable with respect to Shane and Regel. Well, that's what we wanted. So we've now shown that this brisa is consistent. What about damaging done that is all part of Keren, of goring, where we say that it's goring and pushing and biting and squatting and kicking? These are all situations where the animal is trying to do damage, where we say that the first 3 times you're going to be a tam, and after that you'll be a muad. So tam mishalech nezek, muad mishalem nezek shalem. So tam is going to pay 50% damages, and the muad is going to pay full damages. Lo lazeh below lazeh. What if the property belongs to nobody? Could go in chatzar she'enu shel shneim, like a property that it doesn't belong to the two of them. And we'll see what that means in a moment. Chayabo ala shein v'ala regel. Then you are liable with respect to Shane and Regel, with respect to damage done there to the other party. And when it comes to the various forms of Keren, a tam pays 50% and a muad pays 100%. So Katani Miyat, but bottom line is it's a long brisa. So let's go back to the third case. We said, go back to the third case where it's shared property. Chatzar shutafin va'abika, pater ba ala shein v'ala regel. You're exempt. So that shows that Rebbe Lazar's right. Well, kasha adadi. Well, 1 second. Don't we have now a question between these two brises? Is there a way to resolve these two brises? Maybe we could say that the brises are in fact in agreement. Again, we have the brisa of Rabbi Yosef and the brisa that supports Rabbi Lazar. So ki tanya hahi, when was the last brisa taught? B'chatzer hamiyuchedet lezev lezev bein leperos bein leshvarim. Well, when we said that it's a partnership field, what kind of partnership is it? So what we're saying is when we said that it's a partnership that was like a valley, when we're talking about a partnership where you can bring whatever you want into it. You can bring your animals into it. You can bring your fruit into it. But Hahida of Yosef. But when it came to the partnership of Rabbi Yosef, which was analogized to an inn, so the point is that it was a yard for fruit. It was not a yard that you were supposed to bring in your animals. And so as a result, when now this animal comes and eats, it's eating as if it was the yard of the other party, and it's the yard of the damaged party. And so as a result, would be liability. Well, and Daikanami. And in fact, you can infer this explanation of these two brises because the Katani Haga Dumya Pundak, because the brisa where we said you can't bring the animal, that would be the case that is similar to an inn, which of course you don't usually allow. We don't bring our animals into the hotel. The Katani Hasam Dumya Debika, and in the other case, we were comparing it to a valley where you have open space where you do bring an animal. So Shma Mina, and so we say that this is in fact the correct explanation. So Maskif La Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera says, 1 second, you're telling me that if you and I if Stan and I share a field and we're both allowed to bring fruit, and now my animal goes in and eats Stan's fruit there, Kavan demiuchedet lepeirot haba inan uvir b'steacher. Notwithstanding the fact that it may be set aside for fruit, you need the field to belong to the other person. This vileka, it doesn't belong just to Stan. I have an ownership interest. And so as a result, we don't seem to be fulfilling the requirements of the psukim that would require any kind of consumption or regel damage to be in the field of somebody else. So Amrle Abaye explained, Kavan de Aina Miuchedet Lishvarim, because it's specifically not a set aside for animals, Steach Er Karina Bay, we can still call it somebody else's field. So Amrle Rav Acha Medifti Ravina. And so now that we've distinguished between these two barisas, Rav Acha asks a good question. Lema midimasniasa lo pligi, amurai nami lo pligi. Well, now that we've said that these brises don't argue, maybe Rav Chisda and Rebbe Lazar don't argue either, and maybe one of them, Rav Chisda, would agree with, I'm sorry, that essentially Rav Chisda, who says that there is liability, would say that we're talking about the partnership where you can only bring fruit, and Rebbe Lazar, who says that there's no liability, would say that we're talking about a partnership where you can bring fruit and animals, and so maybe that's the explanation. So the Gemara comes back and answers. So Ravina answers him and says, Amar Le, yes, you're absolutely right. The imtim zolomar pligi, and if you want, you can say that they actually do argue, meaning both reads have a legitimacy. And Bekushya, the Rabbi Zera, Peruka, da Abaye pligi. And really, when they argue, you could say that they are disagreeing about the question of Rabbi Zera and the answer of Abaye. And Rashi explains that when you have shared space for fruit and not oxen, well, then Rav Chisda would agree with Abaye, saying that since it's not fit for oxen, it's considered like the field of another. And Rabbi Lazar would agree with Rabbi Zera, saying that since the damager has some rights there, i.e., to bring fruit there, it's not considered the field of another. And so, as a result, that's how we can understand the debate between Rav Chisda and Rabbi Lazar. So now that we've dealt with that, we're now going to go through the four rules offered by Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in the Brisa. So let's take a look. So Gufa, Arba Klalos Haya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer ben Nizakin. So we said that there are four rules, and the rule number one is Kol Shu Rishus L'Nizak V'Lo L'Mazak Chaya B'Kol, that anytime you're in the field of the damaged, but not the damager, you're liable 100%. Ala kol loktani, ela chayav bakol. It doesn't say that you're liable for all kinds of damage. You're liable for the damage in full. So that shows bekuli nezek. You have to pay all of the damage. So mani, who is it that says that you have to pay all of the damage? Well, Rabbi Tarfon, that's Rabbi Tarfon to Amr Mishuna Karen B'Chatzer Hanizak, because he's the one that says that if you have some kind of different kind of Karen, and it's in the field of the damaged party, Nezek Shalim Mishalim, he's still going to pay full damages. Bottom line is that even though I might be a Tom with respect to this, my animal might be Tom, I'm going to be fully liable because I'm in the wrong field. Well, 1 second. If that were true, that we have a principle of 100% liability, if I'm in the wrong field, aim is safe. But what about the last case of this brisa? The last case of the brisa says lolazev v'lolazev. What happens if the field doesn't belong to either me or Stan, and my animal does damage to Stan in that field? Kagon chatzir she'ena shel shneim, like a field that doesn't belong to both of them. I'm going to be liable to Stan for my animal eating his burger or stepping on his vase. So my lolazev. What do you mean? What does it mean? So what does it mean that it doesn't belong to either one of us? That it doesn't belong to any of us at all, meaning neither of us have any interest, but rather it belongs to mark. We have a principle that the concepts of Shane and Regel only apply in the field of the damaged party. And now we're in Mark's field, and Mark's not the damaged party. Stan is the Leica, and we don't have this fulfilled. Elapshita lola ela dechat. So what it means when it says that it doesn't belong to both of them, it means that it belongs just to Stan. But if that's true, v'katani seifa. But then what did we say in that situation? We said tam mishalem chatzi nezek umuad mishalem nezek shalem. We said that a tam only pays 50% damages, and atan l'rabanan. And that's like the rabbis, the Amri Meshuna Karen B'Chatzar HaNizek Chatzi Nezek Hud Mishalem, because it's the rabbis and not Rabbi Tarfon who says that when you have a Keren situation in a yard that belongs to the damaged party, even so, the owner of the animal that did the damage is only going to pay 50% damage because it's still a tam. So Reisha Rabbi Tarfon, B'Sefer Rabbanon, can we possibly say that the beginning of this long brisa is Rabbi Tarfon and the end is the rabbis? And the answer is the first answer that we're going to offer is yes, actually we can say that. It is Amar Lai Shmuel Rav Yehuda. In fact, Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, you smart one. Shavuk masnisa abasarai. You need to, don't ask questions about that Mishnah. Just listen to what I'm saying. Reisha Rabbi Tarfon v'Sefer Rabbanan. The beginning of the Mishnah, the beginning of the I think it's a brisa, right? The beginning of the brisa is according to Rabbi Tarfon, and the end is according to the rabbis. And then actually what it is that was a statement that he made in another context. And so too here, we can make that statement in our context as well. And so although he made the statement in connection with the Mishnah, now we would apply that same principle to the brisa that we have here. So now that was answer number one. Answer number one essentially says, yes, in fact, we're going to ignore the conflict between the beginning of the brisa that we just quoted and the end. And we'll say the beginning is Rabbi Tarfon and the end is the rabbis. But Ravina Mishmei de Rava Amar Kula Rabbi Tarfon. Actually, we could say that the whole brisa is Rabbi Tarfon. Umay lo lazeh v'lo lazeh. What do we mean when we say neither one? Lo lazeh v'lo lazeh leperos ela dechad. No, well, the idea is that when it comes to fruit, then it doesn't belong to both of them. It belongs to just one of them, namely the person who's damaged. But lazeh v'lazeh l'shvarim. But it does belong to both of them with respect to oxen, meaning that I'm allowed to bring my oxen, and Stan's allowed to bring his oxen. But and only Stan is allowed to bring his produce in. So Dilagabi Shane Havila Chatzar Hanizak. So when it comes to the produce, well, then only Stan's allowed to be there. And so as a result, Stan's the one who's allowed to have his produce there. So I have to be careful of his produce. And it's as if I'm in the yard of the damaged party. So as a result, when it comes to Shane and Regel, I am going to be 100% liable. But Lagabi Keren, Havila Rishus Harabim. But since both of us are able to bring in our animals, if my animal were to gore Stan's animal, well, then it would be just like the public domain. And just like in the public domain, I'm 50% liable for Tom and 100% liable for Shane, 50% liable for Tom and 100% liable for a Muad. So too here, I would be 50% liable for Tom and 100% liable for Muad. Well, Ihachi, Arba, Shlosha Havu. Well, 1 second. Based on your read, this new read, we've essentially eliminated one of the categories because the fourth category really doesn't teach us anything new. We're just applying the principles of the first three categories to the situation. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, you know what? You're absolutely right. As we turn to Yudalim Rabet, Shlosha Klalos Ba'arba Makomos. We're talking about three rules, but in four different situations. So we had four different kinds of places from a property perspective. So even though there are really only three rules, we're going to apply them to four situations. Okay. Now we have really a fascinating Mishnah because it doesn't because each line of the Mishnah seems to be a list and not a full statement of some kind of rule. Because let's like a rook and we'll see. Shum kesef, if you have a monetary assessment. Shava kesef, if you have something worth money. Bifnei Basin, in front of a court. Valpi Adim, and through witnesses. B'nei Chorin, the witnesses are free. B'nei Brit, and they're Jewish. V'hanashim b'chlal hanezek, and women can be included in the damages. V'hanizek v'hamasik b'tashlumin, and the damaged party and the damager are responsible for the payment. So, like, wow, that didn't really make any sense. And so, yes, you're absolutely right that this Mishnah does not make any sense, and it's because it's effectively a list. And so that's why on the screen I basically listed the different items, and now we're going to go through each of the items to understand what it means. So the first of the statements is my shum kesef. What's the point of shum kesef, of saying monetary assessment? So I'm Rabbi Yehuda, shum zelo yehe ela bekesef, that when we do an assessment, it should be made based on the money, meaning show me the money. How much was the damage? So, and here's an example. Tanina lahad to Tana Rabbanan. We have a similar law in the Mishnah, which the rabbis taught in the following. We have a rule that basically is like this Mishnah in the following brisa. Para shehizika talis. If a cow did damage to a piece of clothing, the talis shehizika para, or we have a garment that does damage to a cow. Now, it's not that it's doing damage at the same time, according to Rashi, because we're talking about two different locations. Because if we take a look at the Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down, Parasha Hezika Talis, Shidarsa ala b'chatzer Haniza. We're talking about a cow that did damage to the garment in the field that belongs to the damaged party. So Bessie, again, my Bessie, is going to walk into Mark's field and do damage to his nice coat. And that's why I'm going to be liable for Bessie's walking, because she's walking where she shouldn't belong. The talish hezika para birishos harabim. But in the case where Stan's garment it does damage to Bessie, there we're talking about in Rishos Harabim, because we're talking about Kigon Shnis Kala Behema Betalis, where my Bessie, poor Bessie, tripped over the talis, the Nishbar Regel Para, and broke her leg. And so as a result, my ox got damaged. Now, that's a situation that's going to be like a pit, right? And a pit only is relevant when it's in Rishos Harabim. And so as a result, that's why we need to say that these are in or cases. The Ein Omer, in both of these cases, back into the Gemara. So we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, 4 lines down, or 3 lines down from where it says Gemara, a third word from the end of the line. Ein Omrim Teitze Para Betalis. We don't just say that now that my that Stan's Stan's garment got damaged, he should just take my cow, vitalis bapara, and we don't say vitalis, enom rotates para vitalis bapara, and we don't say that that I should take Stan's garment for tripping up my cow. Ela shaminosa bedum. In every case, you figure out exactly how much was damaged, how much was the damage worth, and that's how much gets paid. So that was point number 1. That's what we learned from Shum Kesef, that we have to do a monetary assessment. So Shava Kesef, what do we learn from the next piece of the Mishnah? What does it mean by it's worth money? So we're going to give a couple of different answers until we come to a final third approach that will serve us as the answer. So the Tanarabanan. So Shava Kesef, what does it mean that it's worth money? The Tanarabanan, the rabbis taught in Brisa, Shava Kesef, Milamid she'ain based in his kakin ela b'nechasam sheyesh lehen achrayas. It shows that the court does not involve itself with anything except for property that has achrayas, which means it's real property, which means that it can be collected from even after the owner sells it if he has a pre-existing debt. However, if the damaged party goes and takes the movable property, Beis Din Govin Lo Mehen, then the Beis Din will allow him to collect it. So Amara Mar Shava Kesef. What did you say that Shava Kesef was? Malamet She'ain Beis Din Nizkakin Elan Lechasim Sheyesh Behen Lechrayas. So my mashma, what does that imply? That it teaches that that court only deals with real property. So how in the world did you get that? Meaning, how did the words Shavit Kesef imply real property? So Amar Rabba. So that is in fact the answer. But now the question is how in fact does this imply? How does Shavit Kesef imply real property? And there we're going to offer three different answers. So Amar Rabba Bar Ula Devar Hasheva Kol Kesef. We're talking about something, property, that is worth any amount of money. Well, mean who? What do you mean by it's worth any amount of money? Davar she'ain lo ona, because there's no sense of ona with respect to ona is the rule that you can't overcharge for something. Avadim ushtaris. Well, if that's true, avadim ushtaris nami ein lahen ona. Then when it comes to slaves and legal documents that you're buying, meaning if I buy a debt instrument from you, so then those property also don't have any kind of ona with respect to them. Now, Tosos here makes an important comment. This is a position that Tosos has elsewhere, that when we say there's no ona, we don't mean that you could charge whatever you want for any piece of real estate. Because lav dafka, if we take a look at the second Tosos on the daf davar hashava l'kol kesef, lav dafka the yasser mipal lav dafka. It doesn't mean that you can literally charge whatever you want. The yasser mipalga, because if you undercharged by 50% or overcharged by 100%. So essentially the right price is either 50%, 100% more or 50% less. Yesh lahen ona. Then there can be ona. But it's more, obviously you have more flexibility with respect to the price that's charged with respect to real property. But Tosos does not want to say that you can overcharge whatever you want. Rambam actually says no. In fact, this Gemara is the Gemara that details the laws of ona with respect to real property, and we've said that there's no ona with respect to real property, and so that's in fact how the Rambam passes. So, but in any event, Ella Amaraba Bar Ula, Davar Hanikna Bekesef. So we have a problem, because the bottom line is that if in fact we were to say that we're talking about something that doesn't have ona apply to it, well then the same rule should apply to slaves and legal documents. So if we're going to say that that the court only involves itself with collecting from land, it should also involve itself with collecting from slaves and legal documents. So therefore, we're going to abandon answer number one, and we're going to take another approach. Ella Amaraba Bar Ula Davar Hanikna Bekesef. We're talking about something that's acquired through money, meaning that if you pay money, that in and of itself can enable you to acquire the property. And that is true for real estate. But we have the same question, because Avadim Ushtars Nami Niknim Bekesef. They also can be acquired through money. Ella Amarav Ashi Shava Kesef Below Kesef. We're talking about something that's worth money, but is not itself money. Bahani Kulu Kesef Ninhu. And everything else, including slaves and legal documents, are all like money. So what does that mean? So let's take a look at Rashi. Ella Amar of Ashi Shavit Kesef. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 lines up. Dahainu, now 7 lines up. Dahainu Karkos. That can only be land. Vahachi Mashma Shavit Kesef. And this is what the term Shavit Kesef implies. Yishalem, Shavit Kesef Yishalem, below Kesef Atzmo. That you should pay something that is worth Kesef, but not actual kesef. V'hani kula metalton, and when it comes to all kinds of movables, v'avadim and slaves, vishtaros and documents, kesef ninhu, they are like kesef. Dematzila amtuyunhu mimasa lamasa umizdabani, because you can move them from place to place and then sell them there. And so as a result, that's why these are considered kesef, and real estate is not. And so that's what we're learning from Shava Kesef. And that's how we can now prove the Brisa that we cited. So now Ramile Rav Yehuda Bar Chinana Rav Huna Braid the Rav Yoshua. So Rav Yehuda Bar Chinana asks, poses the following contradiction to Rav Huna. So Tana Shava kesef malama she'ain based in this kakin el nechasin sheyesh lehen achrayus v'hatanya yashiv. But 1 second, you just said that the Beis Din only focuses on real property, but we learned before another brisa that said Yashiv, what that with the fact that he can pay, he's going to return the money, l'rabot shava kesef, to tell us that you can even return something that's equivalent to money, va'afilu subin, and you can even pay with bran. So if even bran is something that you're allowed to pay with, I don't understand how you can say in this other brisa that all we're talking about is dealing with real estate. So hakabamayaskinan biyatme. We're talking about where they're trying to collect from the orphans. And when you collect from orphans, you cannot collect from movable property. You can only collect from real estate that the orphans inherit. Biyadme ka'amrina. Take a look in the last narrow line of Rashi. Biyadme ka'amrinan. De'ish shavak lahu avohan hamazik mikarkai gabi minayu. That if in fact the father who did the damage leaves them property, well then you can collect from it. But if they only have movables, low, then you can't collect it. Why not? Because the metaltali diyadmi lo mishtabde lebal. Those properties are lebal chov. Those properties are not, do not have a lien against them from the creditor. Because we're worried that you could say they were acquired after the father passed away, and so as a result they have no relation to the father. The child should not be liable based upon them, based on their existence. So as a result, we've now explained that the situation of why one of Brisa says that the courts only deal with real estate, and the other Brisa says that you can deal with any kind of money, because the Brisa that deals with only real estate is talking about when you're trying to collect from orphans. But when you're not collecting from orphans, but rather from the person who did the damage itself, well, then you can collect even from any kind of property, including movable property. So 1 second, hold on just a second, Mark. Ibi Yasme Ema Seifa. Well, 1 second, what about the end of that brisa? Because what the brisa said, in kadam nizak v'tafis metalton, that if the damaged party went and took the movable property, Beis Din govin lo mehen, the Beis Din will allow him to collect from them. But ibi yasme amai Beis Din govin lo mehen. But if this movable property is in fact from the orphan's estate, how is the court going to allow the creditor to collect from them? So the answer is Amar Rava Amar Rav Nachman Shetafas Mechayim. We're talking about a situation where, yes, it is now the collection is trying to be happening from the orphans, but the creditor grabbed the movable asset while the father was still alive, while the debtor was still alive. So Hachanami, that's what Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman in connection with another case. And so here too, we can answer Shetafas Mechayim that he grabbed it when the debtor was still alive. Okay, so let's do one more of these lines in our Mishnah. Bifnei Beis Din, we said that it's before a court. So prat lamocher nechasa ba'achar kaf. So this comes to exclude the situation where somebody sells the property and only then gets brought to court. So since it no longer is in the damager's possession at the time of the proceedings, so as a result, that's why he's not going to be able to collect from it. So Shma Mina lava umachar nechasa ba'achar kach ba'ala Beis Din ain Beis Din govin lo mehen. Well, 1 second. Are you telling me that I could go and borrow money from Stan, and then I'll sell all my real estate, so I have no real estate from whom he can collect, and then Stan will be out of luck and I won't have to repay him? Of course that's not true. He'll have the right to collect from the various property that I sold. Ela pras lebeis din hedyo. No, the point is that this is actually coming to tell us that when you say bifnei Beis Din, there are certain rules of Beis Din that apply only to a Beis Din of experts, but not to regular judges, to judges who do not have the necessary expertise and ordination. As Rashi says, third line from the bottom of Rashi, Ela lahachi asa masnisin. Our Mishnah is coming to tell us the following: the Beis Din mumchin done in dine knasos. That when it comes to laws that deal with penalties, which we are about to talk about in the next item when we say al pi ha'edim. So al pi edim. So to here below based in hedyot, a based in of regular people. If just Stan, and Mark and I were to go on a basin together, since none of us have the necessary expertise in connection with court matters with respect to halacha, so we would not necessarily have the ability to judge with respect to various kinds of fines, and so that is the situation there. And Tosos notes that although we aren't currently talking about fines so far, we're going to raise them momentarily. So we've now gone through the first three pieces of our cryptic Mishnah. And so what about the remaining items of the cryptic Mishnah? Well, if you want to learn the explanation for those pieces of the Mishnah, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The pay son. $10 from all for.